Welcome back to Reunited States, the podcast where we bring civil discourse back to our national dialogue. From Manchester, New Hampshire, my name is Jesse Saywell.
And from Los Angeles, California, my name is Tyler Ehrig.
How you doing, Tyler? It's Thanksgiving week.
Oh, preparing. I'm making cocktail ingredients for the drinks I'm going to make tomorrow. Wife's making mashed potatoes, so...
Very nice.
Getting prepared for the holidays. How about you? What are you doing?
You know, we're going to a friend's house, actually, this week. It is the first holiday season that we are not going to be leaving New Hampshire for any significant amount of time. We're taking like a couple nights up to Vermont for fun with my dad and his girlfriend in December. That'll be lovely. But outside of that, prior to the honeymoon in January, we are staying home, and we're very excited about it. So yeah, we're letting somebody else cook. It'll be great. It'll be great to spend time with friends and their family and make new friends, all of that. But
well, with all the difficulty traveling this holiday season, probably for the best, right?
Oh yeah. You know, I already got through. You know, we already ran the risk once a couple weeks ago with the wedding, getting everybody ears. So I feel like it's a good time to just stay put for a little bit. I'm gonna be putting up my Christmas decorations this weekend, which I'm very excited about. You know, I love to decorate. So
I'm buying my tree, and I can already smell the pine.
Oh yeah. We're doing a real tree this year because we both love doing that, and also. The problem in the past has been we're not here, so it just dies, right? So the being here over the holidays means that we get to actually have a real tree, which both of us very much prefer. So, but
that's probably
anyway.
Contentious debate, I imagine.
Contentious debate among who?
Yeah, I've heard people debate about the tree thing. Fake tree, real tree. You're killing the trees, you're promoting a bad industry. I don't know, I've seen it.
Well, you know, you and I worked for a company once where a man got upset with me over $9.99 over the phone, and he proclaimed to me that I didn't know who he was and that he owns the second largest Christmas tree company in northern Michigan. So, to that gentleman out there who also called me a peasant, Merry Christmas, sir, and go fuck yourself. I have never forgotten that. But anyway, you know, when I get a Christmas tree, I just hope it didn't come from northern Michigan. That's my only insistence, is it cannot have come from that guy. No northern Michigan. Washington State, great. New York, any of that. We live in Christmas tree country up here. It's fine. But whatever. So, this week, without any further ado, we have a guest joining us, a first-time guest on the program. And for those of you who know me, some of you know this, I play poker pretty regularly on Friday evenings, a virtual poker game that has been running since the pandemic now. We're going over 5 years. And one of the friends I have made through this poker game that I have never had the chance to actually meet in person, but we, you know, it feels like we have, because we spend, you know, again, you see somebody once a week virtually, you talk, you get to know about their family, you get to know about their lives. It's such an interesting thing, and it's something that I really value. It's a part of my life I really value, in part because that poker game, I will say, I think tends to run a little more conservative, and we'll see what he thinks about this, but I think that the politics of that poker game, which we try to avoid at all costs talking about, sometimes successfully, sometimes unsuccessfully, but the politics, I think, skew to the right? And some people that I care very deeply about, good friends of mine on that table, very much to the right? That's not the case with our guest today, and that was a pleasant surprise for me that I was not the only liberal at the table, and apparently there are a couple of us, but yes, that has been a nice chat, and again, you know, we want those different perspectives, but I think having that experience once a week in which you look past the politics, right? These are just guys that I play poker with, and, I hear about their families, I hear about their interests, I hear about their golf game, I hear about whatever it is. I think is a really important thing for us to remember the humanity, right? The humanity in us all, that in some capacity we can be different and still agree on some things, right? We can have differing perspectives, and that's when we talk about this podcast, Reunited States, that's a goal of mine. So that's why the poker game is important to me, and I know I have done a nice long lead-in to how our next guest, Tom Eicholtz, and I have become friends. But Tom is, as I mentioned, a guy I have played virtual poker with since the fall of 2020. He was a Virginia Tech art major, and pick an industry, and he's probably worked it at some point. He has been married 13 years, together with his wife Sarah for 18, with a 9-year-old fourth grader now. And catching him at 1 in the afternoon when we're recording this might be a little different than the 9 p.m. poker games on a Friday post-happy hour, but we're excited nonetheless to have you here. Tom, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Jesse and Tyler. Thanks, guys. It's really cool to do this, and full disclosure, first time I've ever been a guest on anybody's podcast. So this is really cool to have been invited. I'm excited about some of the things we're going to talk about. It's really cool.
Yeah, we're very honored to have you, Tom. And I want to know. We kind of have to start a little bit with news, right? We always try to address some of the bigger topics here, and I know you keep up with some of these things. You have your own perspectives, and we, occasionally will text our own perspectives back and forth to each other to avoid inserting them into the game with, and upsetting some of our good friends. But
especially when Fox News is running in the background.
Oh God, yeah, we can hear the Fox News.
Keep your mouth shut, but you have to keep your mouth shut. So sending Jesse a text is easy.
Yeah, exactly. Sending a text and enjoying a drink, if you ask me. But honestly, it's a great time, and the more the merrier. That's true. But in the news this week, we have to talk about this breakup between Donald Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Brown.
It hit a what?
Marjorie Taylor Brown.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Because the grass turns brown.
He called her Brown.
He did. Yes.
Stupid.
Yes.
It's such a stupid name.
Actually, it's one of his worst. Not one of his better. But Greene announced that she's going to be resigning from Congress in January. Which, good, I guess. I don't know. We'll see how we feel about that. But Trump, meanwhile, continues to call her a number of names, including Marjorie Taylor Greene.
That's a much better one.
It is a much better one. He should have stuck with that. Not that I think that's a fair thing, but whatever. This is interesting to me, again, because I can't tell what's going on here other than she probably wants to run for president. Maybe that is her long-term goal, as she's trying to set herself up for running for president. But
that or Senate or something. Yeah, some higher seat.
Yeah, I mean, AOC said that AOC and MTG, whatever. She said that she wanted to run, that Marjorie Taylor Greene wanted to run for governor or Senate, and she was upset that the Trump administration said no to her, and that's why all this is happening. That's why she's feuding. That's why she's focused on Epstein. I don't know what I believe. These are lunatics. To me, they're, it's like trying to understand the mind of an unwell person. It's very difficult and above my pay grade, right? But Tom, I'm curious to your thoughts. I mean, do you think that this is a sign of the MAGA base fracturing? Or is this simply another casualty of a GOP member who dared to go against Trump?
I honestly, I think, yes, there is some fracturing, but I don't know. In my experience, you have so many people who are unable to admit that they were wrong. So even as they watch others fracture off, you're still going to have a lot that double down on, oh, he's good for the country. Oh, I'm almost parroting my words of some family members that I know are not going to back off because they would never admit that they were wrong in the first place. So I don't know if there's enough of a fracture based on the mentality of his supporters. The mentality of his supporters is they're gonna ride till he dies. You know?
So that's actually kind of interesting, because I know that a lot of conservative family members that I have that have had this like argument of like, well, they're never gonna they're never gonna back down, right? They're gonna keep kind of continuing to think of some excuse to like rationalize, right, some behavior or some action, some news that came out, and a lot of that kind of parrots prominent Republicans and prominent Republican voices that are doing the same thing, right? They're parroting like Fox News people, Fox News arguments, but they're also parroting like, popular senators, House members, etc. Do you think that like now that we're seeing those same prominent people now like going back on their arguments and shifting away, that might have a reflective result on the average person or the average conservative viewer?
I certainly hope so, but they're going to have to show it to me first. I mean, this is a group of people who denied the scientists when it came to COVID. This is the group of people who whined and complained and said that their kids shouldn't have to wear masks at school. This is the same, I don't think a handful of politicians saying, hey, I'm fed up is going to be enough for them to sacrifice their personal identity, because that's what a lot of it is. It's identity. They've taken on the identity of being conservatives. And even though they might say, oh, I don't like everything Trump does, but I'm a conservative. Well, I don't know. I think when you start talking about people's identities, they get more defensive. And so they're going to have to show me. They're going to have to show me that they're ready to walk away before I'm ready to say that this is fracturing anything.
That's such a great point to talk about identity, because we talk about identity so much on the left, about how personal it is, these issues of like race or gender or sexual preference or sexual ideology or gender identity, any of the, fill in the blank, right? And how difficult it is to overcome discussions and differences over those issues, right? If you identify as something, or if you are of an ethnicity or a background, it's very difficult to overcome that and break bread with somebody that actively, from your perspective or in their words or actions, is trying to or is saying things that kind of diminish or ignore or sometimes actively endanger your an aspect of your identity, right? But it is interesting that you mentioned this idea that like the conservative movement and the MAGA movement, it has become a part of their identity as human beings, that they are Trump people, right? I don't even think that it's conservatives anymore, right? Because there's very little that's conservative about Trump's, economic policies or whatnot. Very populist.
Yeah, it's also not the policy that they identify with, right?
Right.
It's not like the platform that they're saying is who they are, right? It's Trumpism.
Yeah.
That they are embodying, right? It's the MAGAism that they're embodying.
Or you even still have the ones who will say, well, I don't like Trump himself, but I like what he's doing and I like the direction things are happening. So then they mask themselves and say, well, I don't like Trump, but I'm a conservative and I like that. It cracks me up when somebody can defend the man, or I guess defend the policies, but deny the guy. I don't know. There's just so many weird spots that people fall into with it, where they think they're still conservatives, like it's the same conservatives of 20 years ago.
Yeah.
We weren't arguing about these things. We would have thrown people out of office. We would have fired people from positions for the things that are being done right now 20 years ago. And now we just let it go.
20 years ago, the first month of Trump's first administration would have been impeachment and remove, right?
Yes.
He fired the deputy attorney general, the acting attorney general, kind of overnight because he didn't like, I can't even remember her name now. That's how ridiculous this is. But he didn't like, some aspect of something she said, and he fired her overnight, which he wasn't supposed to do. I mean, like that wouldn't even be the top story anymore from Donald Trump, right? But in January of 2017, that was like the Friday night firing. It was like, what are we doing? How long is, and so the bar has definitely moved. I also think you make a good point in terms of like the 20 years ago thing. I talk about this a lot with people who just, people are always asking me a similar question when I just asked you, like, when is the fracture going to happen? When are they going to come to their senses? Well, as Jon Stewart said, if somebody has been running a fever for over a decade, that's no longer a fever, right? That's their running body temperature,
Yes.
right? That's their resting body temperature,
Yes.
right? But the other aspect of this is social media has made it so much more difficult to walk back political opinions, right? They're all on record as being Trump people, right? It's not like, George Bush. It was very unpopular in the last 2 years of the Bush administration to admit that you were a Bush voter. Even in conservative circles like where I grew up, which is a hardcore conservative place, one of the most conservative places in the country, if you look at the districts and the voting history, right? Even in that place, there were a lot of people who did not want to admit that they voted for George Bush twice, right? George W. Bush. Because he was so unpopular. Now, people can't deny that they supported Trump. They're everywhere. Their social media presence of supporting Trump is years and years. It's a decade in the making of them just putting up, just routinely insane things that he does, sharing all of his absurd tweets and, posting pictures of themselves with MAGA hats and whatever it is. That didn't exist in the past.
And their Trump sign's been sitting in their front yard long past election season.
Right.
I have
one
administration. It sat out there. Yeah.
Oh yes.
They're still there.
On my drive to the gym
there.
every day. This morning I drove to the gym. Trump was right about everything. It's sitting out in that guy's front yard. I mean, he went out there during the election and made a large wooden TRUMP and painted it an American flag, put it out in his yard. I mean, like that level of cult following is not easily breakable. And so
there's on my run route, like up the street here, there is, I call it the Trump house, because they have like the flags, like that one like flag that they made after he got like almost shot, with the ear and everything and the fist in the air. Like this house has like 3 of them on like banners. He has one giant like flagpole with no American flag, by the way. It's just the Trump flag and a "Don't Tread on Me" flag underneath it, and it's just those 2 flags. And then there's like 3 Trump flags like hanging on like the like side banners that you see on like the side of houses, right? On like the walls of houses. And no American flags, just the Trump flags. And it's still there. I ran there like a few days ago thinking maybe they took it down because of everything that's happening. Nope. All of it's still there.
Yeah, no.
No change.
Yeah. It's the ununited states of Trump.
I like that.
Look, they don't break, and it's a great talking point, and I appreciate your insights into it, Tom, because it's we all keep waiting, right, for the fever to break, right? It's not breaking. Like I think that for 25% of the country, we could have documented proof of Trump having sex with an underage woman on Epstein Island, which I'm not saying is a thing, for the record. I'm just saying,
or with Bill Clinton,
right? Or with Bill Clinton, right? And 25% of the country would believe him because it's easier to believe him when he would say, "This is a fake. This is made up. This is fake news. It's not true. I could make anything. I could make a video. Whatever it is." Like it's easier for them to believe that than to admit I was wrong about a core part of my identity for the last decade of my life, right? And that's a challenge, but. as we look forward to hopefully having elections to be able to address this, which, again, I think democracy is hanging on by a thread, but I do think it's hanging on by a thread right now. It is still hanging on, I hope.
We'll see how long the DOJ holds out.
Yeah, that's true. Though I did see that for the FBI, the rumor is that Kash Patel has pissed off Trump enough he's thinking about firing him, which means he can go back to his day job of making weird children's books.
Oh God!
Or maybe he'll have enough insights in this gig he's had that he'll go back on his podcasts and air it all out.
Who knows?
Maybe he can come on this podcast.
I don't think they'll fire him just for that reason.
Yeah. I don't know. Trump's never been shy about moving through people, right? Like, it does feel like the first year of this administration, and we're not quite to a year, right? The first 10 months of this administration have been calmer in the turnover, right? Because he had more loyalists, more crazy people than the first one where he was just cycling through people. I mean, Scaramucci was there for like a blink and a half, right? But there have been people have been here longer, but I do feel like the egos eventually have to cause some rifts, right? Like, somebody's got to go here shortly, right? Especially since Trump knows that his poll numbers are not good, and he can't possibly be at fault for this, so somebody else has to take the blame, right?
Yeah, but the Project 2025ers have placed a lot of their people and plan in place, and that's what they needed more than Trump. Was it Steve Bannon who was saying Trump's just a vessel?
Yeah.
For them, he was the ticket they needed to get their people in place, whether it's legally, illegally, competent or not. They needed those people in there to get their agenda through, and Trump didn't care how it worked out as long as he made money.
Yeah.
So, so when he's gone, he'll have his money, his family will have their money, and the 2025ers will have their people in place for as long as they can hold on to power. You know? And they'll break so much on the way out when they are out of power that it's going to be years of putting the pieces back together, I think.
I think you are correct about that. So last week, we did a fantasy draft of 2028 Democratic presidential contenders. We had a lot of fun with this, mostly because we needed something, right? We have to have something to dream about, right? That an end to this nightmare, right? Or at least the beginning of the end. Are there any candidates that you see that would be on your fantasy roster for 2028? Who do you think is a viable candidate? Who would you like to see? Kind of open the floor to you on that.
So all right. So I'll tell you exactly how this played out. So last night I was going through the questions and I wrote my quick answer. And this is before I listened to that episode, which I listened to today while running errands. But I wrote this down in my notes here before, and I just wrote, gay vet who has dedicated his life to public service. But will America elect him? Next choice, Newsom. And so then I'm listening to you two, and there's choices 1 and 2. So I think we're kind of on the same page there. Tyler, you said from your heart, Pete. Because that's how I feel. That is the person that we need in there. But I don't think America's going to make it happen. We almost need. And I don't know if Newsom's it either. I don't know. We need somebody to just... I don't know. We need somebody who looks like a powerhouse. And maybe that is Newsom. Maybe he can pull that together. And it also is going to depend on... Are they gonna try to run Trump again? Is JD gonna actually... who's it going to be against? Because you can make JD look like a jackass real quick.
Anyone could do that. Yeah.
Anyone. I think my 9-year-old could make JD look like a jackass.
He makes himself look like a jackass every time he opens his mouth. So, no, it's a great point. I'm cautiously optimistic that Trump is not going to be on the ballot again. There was that shift a couple weeks ago where he seemed to acknowledge it. I think that was more about his health than it was about, oh, we don't want to run Trump again. I think that there is some sort of acknowledgement that Trump at that age, that they're afraid of the Biden thing, right? They're afraid that, because we all know how quickly it went off the rails with Biden, right? It went off the rails very quickly with him, from being relatively competent and able to hold a conversation to what we saw in that debate, which was...
Yeah, that was like the thing where it's like when we elected Biden, it wasn't necessarily... like Biden wasn't incompetent when we elected him.
No,
right?
And I
like
don't
he was still pretty much there, and it wasn't really until like a year or two in.
Yeah.
So it came really quickly.
And I still truly think
again.
that even Biden on his worst days, it was still had enough of a head about him that he was going to make the responsible decisions. And if given time to sit and think about a decision that needed to be made, he's going to make the right one and a well thought out one. But put on the spot at his age, in declining health, as I think my kid says, he crashed out.
Yeah.
He crashed out, and you couldn't deny it. And there were going to be too many more times that was going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I mean,
but he at least had good people behind him. That's what we don't have with the Trump administration. We have horrible humans.
Stephen Miller and all that. Yeah.
Stephen Miller, what are you talking about? He's the sexual matador.
Oh, God.
No.
Voldemort in a suit.
He is Voldemort
Literally.
in a suit. He looks like him. He's evil.
But I guess that's kind of like one thing, right? Is that like how many, when you're looking at like personalities, right? You mentioned Newsom being like this powerhouse option. And it's true, he has a personality. And whether he's electable is a separate, concern. But he certainly has a personality, and one that's, and he has charisma and all these things. Republican, like when you look at on the right who might be an option to combat that, their options are much more limited, in my opinion, in terms of people with charisma and people with the ability to kind of bring a base together outside of Trump. Like they lack that, where I feel like our candidates have more options for people who can kind of bring voters in. We have young people, we have people who are institution people, but they have personalities, they have gravitas. I don't see a lot of options like that on the right in terms of people who might be candidates for president.
Yeah. Yes. And I don't know. I personally just hope it's somebody who can win and put good people back in positions to lead our country. At the end of the day, the president doesn't make all the decisions. As we're seeing, the president can wreck a lot of things and put really bad people in positions that wreck a lot of things. But if you get good people into leadership positions, you don't need the president to make all the decisions or to have it all. He just needs to be able to talk about the good things that are happening.
What about Wes Moore? I gotta ask you, because that's my boy. I'm a Maryland guy. I'm from Maryland. I love the dude, but I'm curious. What are your thoughts?
So I'm okay with Wes Moore, and what I don't think you're going to get is, so you go to the golf course and you stand on, you go play men's league on Wednesday nights, and you hear a bunch of dudes just ripping on the guy and just absolutely hating it. So if he's not winning over in some way the conservatives in his own state, how's he going to win over the rest of the country or enough of those conservatives to take it down?
Didn't those same people, do you think they were doing the same thing about Obama? Because I certainly do, in my experience. And Obama won over enough people in rural America. Not that he won by huge margins, but Obama won over enough people with his charisma that he was able to cut those margins a little bit, right?
So
You
I
know,
need Wes Moore to come down here to St. Mary's County and win some of those people over. Because
all
I
right.
don't think in Maryland, all you need is the DC to Baltimore vote, and the rest of Eastern Shore and Western Maryland and us down here in the
Yeah,
little
yeah.
southern tip aren't going to be, it almost doesn't matter.
Is there a Democrat that could win some people over in those people you're talking about? Because I don't know if there is.
I don't know if there is either, and that's my concern. Like that's what I'm really worried about with the next election is who do we put up that's going to make a big enough difference. But then it's maybe it doesn't matter who we put up. It's maybe what's the message. And I don't know the answer to that. I wish I
Yeah.
had an opinion on the answer, but I think the message needs to be almost cultish enough for one election, like Trump rallied. You
Yeah.
know, everything they do goes against what over half of his voters need.
It's so true. It's so true. I mean, everything is like destroying rural America right now,
Yes.
and rural America is like, please
still-
give us more. We're tired of winning.
Send me another banner. I'll hang it on my
God.
farm fence.
Right.
And plaster my barn with it. And it's just like, man, when are people going to see that the benefit we have as a country is that we can help each other out?
I'm all about trying to win those people over in local elections, but for the presidential race, I just don't see it happening. So I guess my thought with Wes Moore or Raphael Warnock is somebody who can potentially bring back men of color, right? Like that's a
I'd like
big
to see
thing.
Warnock.
Yeah, I mean, Warnock I really love. Tyler stole him from me in the draft, but it was a great pick. I just think, I don't know, Wes Moore may have supplanted Warnock as, and then again, I said this last week, it's unfair to throw the two black male candidates together and compare and contrast, but they have similar profiles, right? They have similar profiles, one of which, though, is a reverend from Georgia. I do think that some of us would just say, yeah, we'd rather you stay in the Senate and keep winning that Senate
Yes.
race, right? Like there are
And
plenty
I still
of
don't
us.
think. Yeah, I don't think Reverend Warnock is going to win over the white evangelicals.
No,
His faith and his commitment to that isn't the difference maker to win over the religious white.
well,
population
clearly
that's been
they're
voting for Trump.
Yeah.
So then how much is it going to be thrown in his face? How much is the whole religious end of it going to be thrown in his face? And so while I do love Warnock, you might be right back at Wes Moore, if we got to go that direction. But
yeah.
do you think we should make a decision earlier or later or closer to the election?
I think we have time. I want to let it play out, right? See how they do on the debate stage. See how they go. Like our whole thing was predicting who will be the nominee, not necessarily like, oh, who do we want, right? Like we picked a couple from the heart, but I think that the challenge that we face in this coming election is going to be about who is actually viable and electable, and I love that. Because that's when the Democratic Party is at its best, right? When we actually look at, okay, can this person win? And going back to Obama, black people, black voters were initially very skeptical about Barack Obama because they were looking at it and saying, I don't know if a black guy can win. Which is a terrible state, obviously. Like, it's a horrible thing they had to feel that way about a candidate based on their race. It was only after he won Iowa. If you haven't noticed, Iowa's a pretty white state. It was when he won the Iowa caucus that black people in South Carolina said, oh shit, white people like this dude. Let's maybe we can get on board. And it was an enormous groundswell from that point on. But yeah, they're very pragmatic. And many minority communities, which I think are the communities that we as the Democratic Party should be fighting for, they are more pragmatic than white Democrats because they have to be. They have always had to be more pragmatic. They've had to deal with the repercussions of what happens when we lose, way more so. And so, I don't know. I think that seeing who they see as viable is important. That was why Bernie was never the nominee, because people of color did not believe that Bernie was a viable national candidate. Otherwise, I think he would have been the nominee in 2020. But they said no. Jim Clyburn said no. And South Carolina took Joe Biden from dead in the water to being the nominee. And personally, I think Joe Biden was the only candidate that would have beaten Trump in 2020. So, but I don't know. That's my just speculation looking in hindsight, you know.
I'm curious about something you mentioned a little bit earlier, about there being like something missing to get like the vote of, I guess specifically in this scenario, white evangelicals, and I imagine like other like conservative like groups as well that's necessary to win back, right? Do you have any insight or thoughts on what that thing might be? Because to me it sounds like, and this is awful, and I hate that we're in this place, but it seems like we are so limited right now in the type of person that we have to put out in terms of like what they look like, right? Like who they are, their gender. Like it feels like it's so specific that we need to be focusing on when we really shouldn't be, but like the reality is we have to be. Like, is a woman electable right now? I have no idea, right? Like, does it have to be a guy? Does it have to be a white guy? Does it have to be a black guy? Like, are there like, how concerned do we have to be about these kind of factors in terms of electability, specifically with voter bases that are going to be focusing on this, whether we like it or not?
You've got a massive population of, I mean, West Virginia is, I think, a perfect example. I don't have actual numbers, but for decades, West Virginia was a Democratic, a blue state, and they were receiving tons of government assistance for things, and the people did rely on the federal government to get by because coal industry went to hell. There really isn't much industry there, but somehow they were all convinced by Donald Trump that he was going to take care of them. And I always chuckle. What was it the old El Paso salsa commercials from back in the day where they said, "This is made in New York City"? You know, that they're eating the salsa and realizing, oh my God, the salsas that they were eating was made in New York City. It wasn't a Texas salsa. You know, and they bought the guy from New York City telling them in these rural areas of West Virginia, Kentucky, and even, you know, I think down here in Southern Maryland, we're still DC metro, but we're also very, we've got vast amounts of rural area, and people are getting hurt by these Trump policies, and they're still sticking with them. So how does the message, so maybe it's not even the person. Maybe Dems as a whole need to figure out what the hell their message is and just drive it home for the next couple years until that election, so it doesn't matter who the face is. So that we're looking at who, if the face can be one thing, but the message has been clear and consistent for such a long time that somebody's going to come back in and do something for you. You know, because that's all anybody's looking for. Really, a lot of people are just looking for what can you do for me? How is my life going to be better? And I don't think that message has gotten out there. No matter how many times you say that, oh, you know, we're working towards, you know, better healthcare, universal healthcare, they still pick the guy who had no healthcare plan. Couldn't even verbalize what a healthcare plan might look like, but they were willing to vote for him because he said he had one. You know, it's sad. I think at a certain point, but yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
We have concepts of a plan.
Yes. I think so. As recently as within a week or two ago, a reporter had asked him about it because of the big beautiful bill passing, and he literally said like, "Oh, like we have an idea, right, that we're going to push, but we're not going to show it to you yet because, you know, it's still being formalized." Which is
he's been saying that for a decade.
Again.
He has been saying this.
Didn't he say 2 weeks again?
I'm so tired. The healthcare thing is insanity, and it's infuriating, because if it was a Democrat all Fox News would have talked about for the last decade was, where's the plan? We've been waiting, you've been saying, and then they would show all the clips of the candidate just saying, oh, well, you will have a plan, we'll have one very soon, whatever. But nothing. He doesn't have a plan, he doesn't care about it. What they care about is that he trolls the people that they don't like. And he does that more effectively than anyone else. And I think the good news for Democrats is the only candidate in the last 10 years that has been able to turn out those people that Republicans need in rural areas in order to overwhelm the urban areas in terms of overall votes has been Donald Trump. When he is not on the ballot, 2018, 2022, 2025, he has been destroyed. The Republicans have been absolutely massacred at the ballot box when Donald Trump is not on the ballot. And barring some crazy shit where an 85-year-old Trump or 84-year-old Trump is running for re-election against the Constitution, he won't be on the ballot in 2028. And they're going to have to find somebody who can actually turn those people out. And I think they're starting to realize, I think go back to Marjorie Taylor Greene, I think they are starting to realize they don't have anybody. I don't think J.D. Vance is the dude. Marco Rubio certainly isn't the dude. Steve Bannon is a lunatic. I think they're going to turn to Don Jr. potentially. They're going to turn to Tucker Carlson. Those are going to be the people that maybe can turn those people out. But I don't know. I just don't think they know what the future of their party looks like. And they have been the Trump party in the same way the Democrats were the Obama party for the better part of a decade. They have been the Trump party now for over a decade. And rebranding yourself when so much of your party is invested in one central figure is a really difficult thing. If democracy can hold on, I really wouldn't be surprised that in 2028 it's a more of a landslide to what we are accustomed to, a political landslide in terms of swing states, right? Going all one way or all the other way. I would not be surprised if whoever the nominee is, whoever the Democrats put forward, if it is a relatively reasonable human who has the time to run a campaign, I could see them winning every single swing state and potentially being competitive in some other states that we haven't been able to win, like North Carolina, right? I could see that absolutely happening. I could see potentially being competitive in a state like even Florida. I do think that, and Florida has gone off the rails. My dad lives there, but Florida does have a lot of Democrats who live there. I'm sorry. There's a lot of Democrats who have voted for Republicans the last 10 years who I think could look at this and say, I don't know how I feel about where things are going. Let's try something else. That's an optimistic viewpoint. I understand that. But I think without Trump on the ballot, they really, really have some challenges in terms of the states that they're going to be competitive in 28, if we can put forward a competent candidate who doesn't scare half the country, right?
And I'd agree with that if the pessimist in me wasn't chirping in the back of my head when Trump said, Christians, I need you to just vote for me this one time. We'll have it so fixed that you won't have to vote again. And while that sounded absurd, we've seen that a lot of these things that just fly out of his mouth they don't come from nowhere. Somebody chirped that in his ear, that we only need this to happen one time and we've got it all figured out so that we won't have to worry about it anymore. We're going to rig it so that, and he had it on good enough faith that it came out of his mouth that somebody is working to rig these things. And I don't want to start doing election conspiracies now, but I don't think it's a conspiracy that it's a part of this administration's plan to rig some shit. So, I don't know. And they don't care who gets hurt.
Yeah, I agree in the sense where like they will go scorched earth, right? Like Jesse and I have talked about this for years now, that like it seems, especially with this administration, they're fully going scorched earth, and it's going to make irreparable harm for all Americans across the board for a long time. But, you know, you mentioned something about, well, you mentioned a lot about, you know, the future of the party and the future of politics, which kind of leads us to our next question, which I'm very invested in as a parent as well as you. But this is about raising children right now, right? In terms of the political climate that we exist in. And, you know, we both have boys. Mine's 2 years old, so a bit younger than yours. But, you know, I know that come next election cycle in 2028, whoever ends up being the president at that point in time, that's when I'm going to have to start having those conversations, right? You might have already had those conversations, you know, with your children and might continue to do so. So I'm curious, can you talk about what it's like raising children currently in this political climate, and specifically what it's like having discussions and debates about like masculinity, you know, right? When it comes around raising like a boy and what that means, how it's changed.
Oh, yeah. And all right, so as far as raising a boy, now let's see, Conrad was born February of 2016. So Trump was elected president just months before my kid was born. And I was teaching middle school at the time, middle school art, and through the rest of that year, I found it really interesting. I saw an attitude change in a lot of my students where they felt it was okay to talk shit to their brown classmate. The Confederate flag T-shirts were more frequent after that election. The words coming out of these kids' mouths weren't the words of their own. They weren't their own ideas. They were what they were hearing at home. So whether it was grandma or grandpa or mom or dad was suddenly, with Trump in office, free to say all the ugly shit that they, I think, had once been told, hey, we don't talk like that. You know, you might think it, but you don't talk like that. Well, now they were talking, and I saw a change in the students, and I just remember all I said to myself was, you know, having a boy and growing. I mean, I grew up playing golf. That's a certain atmosphere of you know, white privilege atmosphere in and of itself. Went to college and joined somewhat of a meathead fraternity while being an art major. That was a weird little world that I lived in. But I will not raise an asshole. My boy will not be this dick who thinks he can just say and do whatever he wants. And well, I'm a guy and I'm a macho, so I can get away with it and I can do it. No, you're gonna be better than that. You know, and I'm going to try to be a good example for that. And so, but then what comes with that is, what do you allow, or, you know, where you're asking, you know, about masculinity. You know, I'm 5'6". I'm not a big guy. I'm not a commanding presence in a room by any means. And, you know, to have the confidence to stand up to an asshole, especially like somebody who is mimicking a Donald Trump or a Pete Hegseth or, you know, these just jackasses, where do you gain that confidence to do that? And some of it, I think, also has to be physical. You have to physically feel like you can stand up to them, as well as be intelligent. So I'm very excited that I got a very smart kid. I don't have to worry about that end of things. We had one kid. We figured we did it right once, and that's where we're sticking with this thing. But like, I have him in wrestling, and that's a very like macho even the whole wrestling world is very conservative Christian with the Bassett brothers and that whole world right now. It falls in there. But with him doing it, he gains the confidence to, if I had to, I can take you down. I'm not going to, because that's not the right thing to do. But if I had to, I'm going to take you down. He's keeping them active and intelligent, I think, gives them the confidence to be who they are. But yeah, we talk about politics in our house, and we don't shy away from it if he's in the room. I mean, my biggest fear is that he's going to say something at school that people are like, hey, we get a phone call. Hey, Conrad told his friend he was an idiot for saying he loves Donald Trump. But we've also had the conversation, you maybe don't do that, like just kind of walk away from that conversation right now. You're only 9, but we're not shying away from letting him hear it now, because that is going to slowly shape who he is. Sorry, I don't know. That was kind of a run on.
No, I'm really happy to have heard it, because that's been, as a new parent, that's been my big concern, right? Is that, while I am obviously very politically minded, my wife's very politically minded, we have discussions about politics all the time, and very in depth, because we're both like just kind of glued to the news a lot, when we're alone. And we try our best to kind of have those conversations in open air, so that even he's 2 years old, he's not going to really digest it, but he will eventually, right? Because it's just going to be the way we talk, like, routinely. And since we both kind of align politically, like, it's never like a debate or anything, right? It's always just kind of like this, almost like circular,
Yes.
Yeah, conversation of like, didn't this suck? Yeah, it sucked.
It's common conversation, normal conversation.
But I have been concerned of our man. Like, what if we get really heated one day and he takes that to go to school, right? And if he hears something that aligns against what, he hears in the household, I don't want him to be like, oh, like, my dad said that, or my dad was saying like, this MAGA person's an idiot, and repeating that, right? And I don't say that, or I try not to say that around him, of course. But it is a concern of mine, right? And I'm trying, especially with this podcast, like I'm trying my best to be like reminding myself in my language to disagree, but not insult, right? And I feel like it's kind of like, it's tough, right?
Okay. So I've got big thoughts on that, because for years, look, I look at myself, I've navigated these conservative spaces my entire life. I'm a bald white guy who plays golf, and for work I drive an F-150. Okay, like, because I need to tow things. My other car is a Subaru. I'm on the golf course advisory board, but we're a public golf course. And I commonly have to remind everybody that we're not a private golf course. We're a public golf course. And, navigating these weird spaces when you don't think like the other people who are in that space is kind of tough. But at a certain point, do you have to give credit to somebody's opinion if it's just a pure lie? I mean, I feel like that's what news media has like the major outlets tried to do at a certain point was give some space to the other side. But how do you give space to a blatant lie? Or how do you give space to something that's going to adversely affect the population, So do we just stop giving them that space and just say, you're an idiot? Your views these aren't views. You just believe in lies. I don't know where giving somebody the space to have their own opinion and calling them out for being an idiot stops, because I've reached that point with a lot of people, and I hate that I feel that way. But I know my kid's absorbing it now. He's 9 years old. He's got thoughts on things because of what me and mom say, and he should be able to make his own opinion about things. down the road, especially as he gets older and learns more. But I shouldn't have to also say to him, hey, you have to give consideration to this person who has a completely batshit crazy view. You know, like,
I love that.
I
love
that's
that.
kind of where I'm at on the.
I think that's a great point. I have this a lot as an educator, right? Like, and I'll tread lightly here, but there's of course times where it's like I'm discussing a subject matter or a specific topic that, in my mind, it's very obvious what the answer is. But I believe also very firmly that it is not my job to tell a student what to think or to teach a student what to think, but rather teach them how to think for themselves, right? And that's a very difficult walk or line and road to walk, right? It's a tightrope walk, right? I can't quite figure it out, and I think as an educator I get better and better every year at figuring that out, but also the subject matter gets more and more complicated every year about, the things that we talk about. So I can relate. I'm not a parent, but as I've said both on the pod and off, my students, very much I look at my contribution to the future of the world as being, can I help put forth better students, right? People, better citizens. Can my students be better thinkers, better citizens, and can they critically think? And honestly, if some of them believe something that I don't believe, I genuinely am okay with that, as long as they're doing it based on the right reasons, as long as they are approaching it with critical thought. If they come to a different conclusion than I do, I'm fine with that. But I want them to be able to think critically about these issues. And it's such a challenge to not, because of course I'm biased. I never deny to my students that I have
Everyone's
my own
biased.
biases.
To say you're not, you're lying, right?
Right. Everyone has it. And so to tell them, these young people, that I don't have any biases or that I know all the right answers is ridiculous. I am giving them my perspective on various issues, and they will come up with their own if they are willing to put in the work to think critically. But God, as a parent, in this time period, like, what a challenge. I have to tip my cap to both of you as you try to raise, especially young men, right? This is such a challenging time to be a man in society, and I know it's like, oh, boo-hoo, men, and all of that. I get it. I understand that there is a force that is trying to actively oppress everyone that doesn't look like me, right? I get that.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean that challenges don't exist, right? It doesn't mean that there aren't other challenges that are presented by that don't exist, right? And so I can't tip my cap enough to both of you for raising young men in a way that I think is very productive, is very healthy, but I'm sure the challenges are going to continue. Conrad, you said, is 9, right?
Yeah.
And Tyler, Owen is 2. You've got a long time between now and adulthood for both of them. There's a lot of challenges that are going to present themselves, and God, in the last, think about just the last couple of years, what new challenges have been presented. You guys are doing the important work, and I applaud you for that, for what it's worth.
I'm going to tell a quick story because I kind of forgot about this, but so my sophomore year of college at Virginia Tech, I was in their leadership development program, which meant I just had to take like one class each semester to stay in it, and got better dorms and all that. But one of the classes was essentially it was a class on racial bias taught by Nikki Giovanni, who wrote the We Are Virginia Tech speech after the shooting. She's an author, a professor, an amazing person. And I sat through that whole class that entire semester, and in my head I had zero ability to get out of how do I make this about me and figure out how to understand what she was trying to convey to the entire class. And I look, it wasn't until probably my early 30s that I thought back to it was 10 years later that I thought back to sitting in that classroom and not having gotten a single point that was trying to be made because I sat there and wanted to make it about me. But fortunately, I sat through that class and 10 years later was able to understand that I have some things I need to fix about myself. You know, I have racial bias. I have views that don't align with who I want to be. You know, I was the first person to chirp up about, oh, we shouldn't do any kind of tuition forgiveness. You know, my parents saved up their money and paid for my college for me to go to school. Well, how privileged was that of me? You know, like I didn't have to take out a single loan. I didn't, but it took years to, I think, really become to change some of my views, which is where some of my conflicts with family fall in, because I didn't necessarily have these conflicts with certain family members for years and years. And they didn't really voice theirs, but we sort of aligned until I sort of figured out I wasn't quite thinking the way I wanted to think. And they actually were emboldened to be more like they wanted to be through the Trump presidency. So it was a weird shift, and we kind of went to further from the middle of each other over time. But I just found it interesting that I sat through this lady's class that I should have learned a lot of these lessons and a lot of these things that took me another 10 years to finally get to. But thank God I sat in that class. So.
That's fantastic. I think, and Jesse and I can probably both relate to this, is that like, you know, when I was in my master's program at Claremont, I also had a lot of the same classes. I had classes that were on like multicultural, like business cultures and stuff like that, right? And how to handle, because it's all HR stuff, right? So it's all like how to handle microaggressions, right? How to address microaggressions, both in yourself and in others, how to teach it as well as absorb it. And that stuff opened my eyes like completely. Just as you said, I think it's so important that people take some variety of that class or that sort of like a lecture or something, right? Because even if you don't expect it to change you, like it really can. Right. And it really can open your mind to something that you really weren't expecting to be open about or even know exist. But I love that. I have another parenting question for you. Honestly, your last answer was so awesome and so incredible that I'm like, I want more parenting advice. But this is related because, and this is a bit of a segue into our last topic here about kind of just friends and family, and moreover, having like that mix of conservative family members with liberal family members, whether you are one or the other, right? Just having like kind of like the combination there. And I wanted to know your thoughts as a parent and as someone who is clearly trying to teach a very, specific like political ideology, right? Pass on something that you believe to be, the proper way of thinking, the proper way of seeing the world from a political lens, and I agree with it completely. How do you feel about the concerns that many people have about having children spend time with conservative family members? I'm talking more than like an hour or two. I'm talking like a weekend, right? Go see grandparents who are like either Trump voters or just conservative in general, or just not even conservative, liberal, just opposite of you. Right? Just have a view that is opposite yours. Is that a concern that you think is valid? Is there a way to address that in such a way that we're not isolating or keeping our family away from them, but also being wary of like, and trying to kind of drive away the concern of like, are they going to try to indoctrinate my children into thinking something that I really profoundly disagree with?
I'll let you know in a few years, because we're in the middle of that navigation right now, and it sucks. 100% it sucks. It's not where I want to be with my parents. It's not where I want to be with my sister. It's not where I want to be with, outside of that. But it's very confusing especially for in a scenario where I didn't think it was such a big deal for a very, very long time. We let it all go for a very, very long time. And for me, somewhat of the deal breaker, or somewhat of the bigger problem started with during COVID, when I realized that they were willing to buy the lies coming from the president and be unsafe and decide it was more about them than it was about listening to what experts were telling us, whether they ultimately were right or wrong. I can take advice from an expert who ultimately says, "Hey, I got it wrong, but I was trying to do the safest thing." And when I saw them hear those same words, but then decide, "I want to get on an airplane. I deserve to see my grandchild. I deserve this. I deserve that." It was really tough. And then to still like make some accommodations and make it work, and just over time, just kind of getting beat down by how do you say you care about your family when you clearly can buy what this guy's saying and not care about anyone else in the world? It just goes backwards. And so then to me it's scary to think, boy, I was in a lot of these spaces that shaped my views, that took me ultimately into my 30s to really look at and adjust. I think I was always there. My head and my heart were where my views ultimately are now, but I didn't have it all put together until later. It took time, it took time to see all the little spots that I had missed. And it's funny because my wife's parents are very liberal, but also not very interested in being as involved. They kind of have their world and their thing, and we go up to see them. We have a good time, but it's like the ones who are beating our door down are the ones I don't really want him to have to, or to end up listening to. So it sucks.
I just want to say, and I'll let Tyler kind of input, as somebody who obviously from a parenting perspective has a different perspective on this and whatnot, but it's thinking about the COVID aspect, right? I don't know if you feel this way, but looking at the realities of our poker game. COVID was probably one, it's the reason that the poker game exists, which is hilarious, but it's also the one thing in terms of vaccines and all of us that led to one of the more contentious kind of debates that we had with several people on our poker game that did not want to get the COVID shot, right? They were not interested in doing so. And eventually, I think several of them ended up getting it regardless, but they came to that on their own conclusion. But I do remember that as being a very contentious issue. COVID really does feel like, in most, if you look in history at the United States and throughout many countries, crisis does tend to bring people together. It feels like COVID brought us together for about 1 month. And then after that month, it was politicized. And all of a sudden, we had George Floyd. We had Donald Trump telling people to inject themselves with bleach. We had a presidential election. We had Trump having COVID and denying it and going to a debate. We had debate over the greatest accomplishment of the first Trump administration is the Project Warp Speed, getting the actual vaccine that now he wants nothing to do with. He wouldn't even, he got booed at Republican events for promoting the vaccine or saying that he took the vaccine. He got booed to the point where he never mentioned it again. It's wild. It is a strange thing how that one event radicalized people. And I get it because it pissed me off about a variety of things. I think that kids should have been back in schools sooner. I really do. I genuinely believe that as an educator, that they should have been back in schools sooner. Not immediately, but sooner. I do think that that was a flaw and that was a mistake. But I also, like you said, I also fully supported trusting scientists in COVID, because who else was going to know better about this? Like, am I going to sit here and tell a scientist that I know better than they do about how to proceed with this, this new, literally new disease that is spreading throughout the world? It is interesting to me that COVID has been such a polarizing event in our history from a political perspective, when so many other crises
and it
have
shouldn't
been
have
unifying
been.
events.
That's the worst part. It absolutely shouldn't have been. All we had to do, or all we needed, was both sides of the aisle to say, let's listen to the experts, guys. Let's do what they say. Let's be safe. Let's, would have been much more comfortable with kids going back to school sooner if everybody was on the same page of trying to stay safe outside of that. But that wasn't the case. It had gotten politicized to the point that you had a whole bunch of people saying, this is bullshit, I'm going to be unsafe. And a whole bunch of people saying, oh my God, what are you doing? Like we're going to end up killing each other, or because we're around, I'm going to end up killing your grandmother who lives with you. And therefore it made it unsafe to go back sooner. It's just, as far as kids learning online, all you had to have was both sides say, hey guys, we all know this sucks. This is awful. This is not how anybody wants to learn. But hey, every single one of you parents out there, whether you're urban or rural, we're going to try to get you hotspots. We're going to make the library parking lots available. Get your kids to these parking lots. Let them learn something, even if it's online right now, so that they don't fall behind. Instead, people bitched about their kids not going back to school and then told their kids, don't bother doing online school. It's not worth it. It's a waste of your time. Well, now we have a whole group of kids who are so far behind. And then you got my 9-year-old, who we did school every single day at home and didn't miss a step, because we took an active role on our own. But I think everybody would have if they were told to, if they were led that direction. But we had one side that decided every single point of the way, we're going to go the opposite. We're going to twist the knife a little bit.
It's a great point. Really great point.
So Tyler, you asked me the question. So where are you at in some of the family dynamic type stuff? Is it are you struggling with what to decide about it, or are you just kind of doing it and see how it goes? Because that's kind of what we did for years.
And part of the reason why I wanted to ask the question was because I'm scared of it, quite frankly, right? Like this is going to be our one and only kid. And this is all very new to me. And, part of
one and only, so he says,
shut up. But
we said that and we stuck with it. Don't worry.
See, Tommy gets it. So listen, in the way, both me and my wife grew up, and we grew up very differently, politically speaking, is, especially with my wife, she grew up in a very conservative household. As late as literally the day she moved out with me, she was in an extraordinarily conservative household. And this is 2017 that we moved out. So Trump just got elected, and that was a debate. I mean, we were in fights. I was in fights with her parents for months and months and months. And she was fully on board with it because that's all she knew, right? And I would see her regurgitate this stuff, and, I stuck with it because, I loved her, and we got along on many things, and I could tell that, it's parroting, and I, tried my best to kind of have conversations. When she moved out, it kind of she found her own base, which ended up being very, very progressive. I would say more progressive than me. And, she has kind of developed her own sense of where she aligns politically. And that's great for her. I'm happy that she found her own voice, but it makes me concerned about like just how much influence a household can have, right? So when we started talking about children, and when she was pregnant and I was not a quiet parent yet, but thinking about the parent stuff, I was terrified of like the impacts and the influence that, a conservative household member of the family, not just hers, but, pockets of mine as well, could have on, a growing mind. And because I align so strongly against a lot of those like facets, right, those arguments, if my history with both parts of my family and parts of her family are any indication of, I was like, this is going to be a problem. I don't want my kid around that. I don't want him to pick up on things that is clearly just either, discriminatory towards a group or towards a people. An ideology that I'm like, this doesn't work. Her folks were very like economically conservative, so they were always spitting out like super like big, Republican talking points on like lower taxes, on eliminating social benefit programs, all that stuff. So I was terrified of that. I've kind of loosened on it, I think, like recently, only because I feel like I'm better at like having conversations with like those folks and like knowing the kind of counter arguments and knowing how to have discussions. I'm a little bit less scared of it, but I still kind of am, right? And there's an apprehension that I have in having my children around those spaces when I'm not present, that I feel this. So it's like it's like a guilt, right? I don't want him around that for kind of selfish reasons, where I don't want him to like absorb those thoughts and ideas. But I also feel like, is it right for me to keep, my son away from his grandparents or from like his aunt and uncle or other family members that like, there's no reason they shouldn't see their blood child, their, family member, right? Their brand new family member. But I'm scared of like that impact. So I'm trying to rationalize like, where's like the middle ground, right? Where's the middle ground of towing this line between, yes, like family deserves to see family just from that kind of like, familial like bond kind of perspective, right? Especially when it's like grandparents and stuff. But also like, man, like I do not want him to hear, how like, Medicare for all is like a plague on humanity and how it's like awful and terrible and like everything should be privatized and that kind of stuff, right? That's kind of where it comes from.
So if I'm giving advice, and my wife would give you the same advice, where we didn't make, what we didn't do was set earlier boundaries, because we also didn't quite see it. It wasn't a prominent part of, I guess, my parents' identity when Conrad was born, this whole conservative Trumpy thing. It grew over time. And so we were just doing the same old thing I'd always done. You go over for dinner, you do the things, you talk. We didn't really talk politics much prior to all of this, prior to Trump being who he is and us agreeing that he's an idiot. And my parents saying, oh, this is all great. This is all fine. Give him a chance. To all the way to this point of we didn't set enough early they were daycare twice a week from the time my wife went back to work. So they really did form a bond with him that at this point, it does feel unfair that I'm not going out of my way to go spend holidays or go out of my way to say, hey, come visit. Because I really I have a really hard time spending time. I also keep hoping they'll see the light at some point. I don't know if that's ever going to happen. I don't know where that happens or how that happens or what, but I just got to the point where I've had enough. But I think for you, he's young enough. If you set the boundaries, you've been having these discussions with them since you and your wife got together. So there's no shock from them to you or you to them on how everybody feels about things. I guess I didn't realize my parents were this far down the hole. I don't want to make bad memories. Like that's the other thing. It's like I'm really tired of making crappy memories where we fake it all day and then we get into the evening and after dinner and nobody can hold their tongue, and it just turns into a crappy discussion about things that aren't real. This is like I was saying earlier, the talking points, the crap getting thrown at me aren't real things. These are pure lies. One of the really early ones was my mom. Well, there's all these Muslims in Michigan that are going to take over Michigan and institute Sharia law. I said, where did you hear this? What level of truth do you have to this? But like, how do you argue with crazy? Of course, then I'm told I'm crazy and I need to get help. So I don't know. I don't know how much advice that was, other than we're all out here.
I think it's great.
These situations, and it sucks.
And it's less advice and more just the discussion about it, right? It's just like, it's the back and forth is great. And I think
seriously,
we should. And honestly, of other parents I've spoken to in kind of similar stages of parenthood that I'm in, right, with like very young kids, like under 5-year-old kids, I think there's similar conversations and concerns that they're having with the same thing, right? Because of how mainstream politics is, all of a sudden, this is a problem. And this is something that they have to think about, where like pre-Trump, it really wasn't, right? Like pre-mainstream, who cared? Like you could go stay with your goofy uncle who lives in like Timbuktu. Like who cares, right? Yeah. Like that's just a fun thing you get to do. Now it's like, oh crap, this is uncle who lives in Timbuktu like a MAGA, conspiracy theorist, QAnon, I don't know. And all of a sudden that becomes like a concern of yours, right? Yeah. Where before it didn't matter. And now all of a sudden, like you have new parents being like, do I need to like cut out family members and like not have a kid? Is that going to be harder, easier? I don't know. And I think it's important that people hear conversations like this, right? Because I think there's a lot of internal conflict that a lot of people in similar positions to you and I are having, especially parents, right? With just how everything's going. So I really appreciate the discussion on that. I think it's really, really important. But I remember when you mentioned the Sharia law thing and like these like ridiculous arguments, the one that drove me up a wall that I would hear was the Obama's a dictator who's going to like become like, he's going to like announce like, martial law across the land. Yeah. And the predication of that was because of Obamacare, because of the Affordable Care Act. Because he did that, he is clearly going to announce martial law across the country and become a dictator. And no matter how many times I said that's ridiculous, that's just frankly ridiculous. I don't even have an argument. That's just ridiculous. Mm-hmm. That will never happen. Of course, it never happened. It didn't matter, right? They believed it no matter what I said. And it's just some of these arguments, you're totally right, are just like absurd.
And I had family that I spent a lot of time with in my growing up that had those same views right there. That because I had spent so much time with them, I assumed that their view was based in some level of reality. And I held on to maybe there was something to that for a very long time. I hadn't grasped the fact that it didn't set in with me, and then it took a really long time to really realize what I thought about things, because it really wasn't a big deal in general. Oh, my aunt said this crazy thing. Maybe I should look into that, but I didn't give it any thought beyond that. Well, now every time somebody says something crazy like that, you look it up and try to figure out where it came from. Like you used to not even be bothered by what somebody said around politics because it wasn't a big deal. Now it's like, oh my God, what part of Project 2025 did that come from that I need to make myself more knowledgeable on that so that I can refute their insane statement?
We've had discussions where like I've heard discussions that my wife has had with family members, and like they would say something that sounds like plausible but a little weird, right? And it's like it feels like, a Republican talking point, and her counter argument, in very loud counter argument, will be like, where did you hear that? What sources are you using? Right. Yeah. That's her counter argument. Not kind of like substantial, like, well, right. Have it back and forth. It's always like, well, show your sources first before we even talk about this. Because if you don't, then I'm just going to say you're a liar, or like, I'm going to say like you're believing fake news. Oh, it's Fox News. I'm just not going to consider it whatsoever. And she's quietly said that, like, oh, your source is Fox News. Never mind. That's bullshit.
Yeah. And when I'd ask for a source, I'd be told, well, you just have Trump derangement syndrome. You're crazy. You're deranged. You just won't give him a chance. So now I didn't get an answer to my question of what is your source, and then the conversation was ended with an insult. And how do you move through a weekend constantly having those interactions? And it's been very difficult, because if somebody doesn't want to give their source and they just jump to an insult, the conversation's kind of ended at that point. But both people feel pretty crappy about it.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that's going to be the big question on everyone's mind tomorrow, right? Thanksgiving is when everyone comes together, and it's going to be where everybody is going to be like holding their breath, I think, right? Being like, who's going to be the person that kind of like pops the question that erupts in like a massive feud, and food starts flying everywhere? Because I can totally see that happening now, right? Just like you said, like when every discussion ends with an insult, right? Or a statement that doesn't really say anything, that's just going to be, that just erupts in a fight, right?
Yeah, when somebody gets told that their view, that they feel valid in having their own views, is just purely based in lies, well, it's kind of a conversation ender. Like, I don't know. That's kind of where where we started this whole thing of, is MAGA fracturing? I don't know, because I know too many of these people who will never admit that the views they've had for a decade now, they might have been wrong about. And they've been taught to double down.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if the path forward then is to genuinely, and this sounds terrible, but like in the spirit of forgiveness, we have to just allow them to kind of quietly disavow. Like, they don't have to publicly do it. In today's society, we're so obsessed with, you must publicly apologize for everything you have done wrong. You must actively come out and totally, disavow your previous positions. I wonder if the path for us as not just liberals, but just like everyone, is very much the same path that has been put forward in many other situations in history, in which we largely just say, okay, we have to move forward. You're not going away. Like, we're not going to be able to just, like, flog you in the streets, which would be a terrible way of handling this, obviously.
I mean, like, certain people want to do that.
Certain people do want to do that, and I just genuinely disagree. I just think that we do have to move forward and just say, this happened. This was a terrible moment in American history. Hopefully historians will look at this and have the chance to look at this and say, wow, what a terrible, fucked up time in history. But we have to move forward and not necessarily try and be all high and mighty if and when we ever get back into power. Is it a time when we have to just say, okay, guys, like, let's move forward. We're not going to talk about Trump anymore. We're not going to look backwards. We're not going to sit here and talk about January 6th. Maybe that was the issue. And I will openly admit that then, if that's the case, I was wrong about this. Because throughout the Biden administration, I genuinely felt like pardoning Trump, ignoring January 6th, was a mistake. and I'm not saying I necessarily believe this, I'm just putting this forward as potentially a theory that maybe now we just have to accept, yeah, these people thought that that was the right thing to do in this time period, and maybe persecuting people, going after Trump, going after him politically, even if he deserved it, going after him through the Justice Department, whether I think that was politically motivated or not, which I do not, but maybe that was a mistake. Maybe we have to do the Gerald Ford and actively go back and say, yep, I'm going to pardon Richard Nixon. I know that he made mistakes. I know that he broke the law, but the country will be better off if I do this and we move forward. Maybe that's the path. And that's a really tough pill to swallow from somebody like Donald Trump, who is currently calling for people like Mark Kelly and one of my congressmen here in New Hampshire, Maggie Goodlander, to be executed.
But
right?
at the same time, like
this is a crazy time.
I hear what she's saying, but like, you know, when you look online at like the reception to the left, right, and to institution Democrats, like a lot of people are saying that it's the fact that they're not bearing fangs enough that's kind of the issue, right? Like that we're not doing enough, that the party, I should say, is not doing enough against, right, the trajectory of the right, and the platform of the right, to make a change. So like I feel like stepping back and kind of trying to like let them just do their own thing and kind of like walk away is more what they're concerned about, right? Is more about what the base is mad about.
It's what those people are concerned about. Yeah, the radicals absolutely in the party are going to be upset if we reach the end of this, if we regain power and we don't actively try and put them, you know, like if we don't actively try and punish the people who came before us who did these things. But is that necessarily in the long-term best interest of the country? I don't know.
Jesse, I think that's exactly what we're going to do, because that's the American way. We bury it. We're going to let these people crawl back under their holes and not have any accountability for the destruction they've caused to the country. And we're going to allow them to go crawl back into their hole and hide their racist comments and hide their bigotry and their homophobic views until they get another chance with a guy like Trump, who has shown them the way to get there, until they get to come back out of their hole and scream that they hate brown people again. And we do this. We've buried our worst things in the United States over and over and over again, instead of actually confronting our worst things. I mean, I think the Germans even had like denazification classes for people to bring Nazi sympathizers back into their community. And, you know, it was an opportunity for you to learn why your views were bad when you felt that was the right. And I'm not saying we're going to get there, because I really do think we're going to allow, if Dems can get back into power, we're going to allow them all to crawl under their rocks until they have their chance to come out again. And it sucks.
It's a great point, and you talking about Germany is important. I just watched the film Nuremberg yesterday, which if you haven't watched it, I think is a fantastic film to check out. It's not a light film by any stretch of imagination, but it talks about the aftermath of World War II, right? What did we do? How did we deal with the Nazis? And I think one of the things that it's been criticized for as a film is that it does portray people like Hermann Göring, who was the number 2 to Hitler, as a human being. But the whole point of the film is to remind people that they weren't actual monsters. They behaved monstrously, but they were human beings. And the main psychiatrist who interviewed all of these Nazis came back to the US afterwards and said, yeah, they weren't some, strange race or some strange mental illness of man. They were men. And they had families that cared about them. They were average individuals, normal people who had normal lives, who also exterminated millions of people. And the ability to do that and the understanding that like that could happen here is the reason why he was basically drummed out. He ended up committing suicide. That's the whole purpose of the film, is that the psychiatrist who came back and wrote a book and said, yeah, it could happen here, was ignored by the U.S. And we're living the results of that ignorance, the belief that it could not happen here. And I'm not saying that this is Nazi Germany. Like, I think that comparison is often overblown. But there are certainly fascists in our government, right?
Yeah.
There are people who have bought into that level of government control and that level of far-right ideological fear of others that existed, that created what became Nazi Germany. And that is the concern, right? How do you deal with those people? The difference is Nazi Germany was defeated on a battlefield.
Yeah.
And we're, God forbid, America becomes a battlefield, right? God forbid that the United States becomes a battlefield, because the results of that will be millions and millions of Americans suffering even more than they already are. And that's the scary thing. That's the fear that so many of us have, is that if we do try to prosecute some of these people who have led these very extreme ideologies, what will come out of that will be a backlash that will lead to civil war and violence. And I don't know how to get around that.
I mean, it could. I don't disagree with that inherently, but I think going to the point of the denazification in Germany, you know, if we look at the most recent German election as an example, like it worked, right? Like, I mean, yes, there is a section of, you know, far right ideology within, you know, within German politics, but they were defeated, right? Like, they didn't gain power, like they didn't win their election. And a lot of that is the Nazi comparison. A lot of that is that fear that has been like integrated into German society over like just Nazis bad because Nazis are bad. So there is some credence to like the denazification having a relatively positive impact on keeping that ideology from completely overwhelming the country, even now when it's so contentious and it's at its largest that it's been within the country, but also globally. You know, it did, like, the denazi stuff, like, did have an impact, and it did allow for the alt-right party in Germany to be defeated in their most recent election. So there's some credence to that,
and
right?
They also have laws. They have laws. You can't celebrate. It's almost anti-free speech, but you can't fly a Nazi flag just because you feel like it. You can't run around saying, yeah, I'm a Nazi, just because you feel like it. You know.
Meanwhile, here we have Confederate Memorial Day in 11 states.
And we did that after, what was it, 40, 50 years after the war ended. And we allowed those people to crawl back out of their holes and assert their dominance with statues all over the South and fly their flag all over the South just to say, hey, just in case you forgot about 50 years ago, we're still in charge. And then it took another 50 years to do something more about it, you know? And then another 50 plus years later, we're still having these issues because we didn't address it and squash it 150 years
That
ago.
makes you think, right? It makes you think how different it would have been if there was actual legislation that went through that kind of like banned or otherwise, you know, made it illegal in some form to celebrate, you know, like the Confederacy, right?
The Confederacy, yes.
It makes me think what would have happened if John Wilkes Booth had not shot Abraham Lincoln in the back of the head at Ford's Theater, right? Like, that is the reality of the nation, right? If we had an actual figure who could have led Reconstruction, and Grant, for all of his strengths, also had significant flaws and could not do it. And when you look back on it, the people that don't understand, like, why are we where we are, look at Reconstruction. And it wasn't people in the South. It was people in the North. It was the liberals in America who got tired of Reconstruction. They got tired. They felt like, we won the war. I don't care anymore. They did not care about the issues of black people in the South and minorities in the South. And because of that, they cared more about their own pocketbooks. And as such, the country gave up on Reconstruction, and we had Jim Crow for nearly a century before the Civil Rights Movement, right? That's the history of this country. And that doesn't mean I hate this country. Like, let's be real. I love this country. I think we've done an amazing, remarkable thing. But we are still dealing with the sins of our past in a way that we've never fully addressed them. We've never fully addressed the fact that the founders established this country as a place where slavery could exist because they otherwise could not have gotten the Declaration passed, right? And so it's a difficult subject to talk about. We're going to continue living with the challenges that were created by the people that came before us. But it's not like Nazi Germany, right? Nazi Germany got demolished and defeated on a battlefield, and it got legally, by multiple countries, got legally prosecuted in a court of law. And that was the film Nuremberg, showing that multiple countries came forward to say these were crimes against humanity. That did not happen here.
No.
Alexander Stevens, the vice president of the Confederacy, ended up becoming the governor of Georgia post-Confederacy, right? This is not a same thing. We have never fully addressed our own sins, and as such, we continue to live with the results of them, and that poses challenges in the 21st century of how we address this in an era in which social media allows hate speech and conspiracy theory to run wild. And I wish we had the answers as to how to deal with that. But personally, the only thing I have ever found that helps that is personal relationships. Shutting people out entirely, I have not found to work. But opening up some level of personal relationship and reminding people who I disagree with that I don't agree with their worldview, but also I am a human being who has value that they care about, I have found that to be productive. It doesn't solve a problem, but I do feel like it is a means to solving a problem long term.
I find it to be exhausting.
It's totally exhausting.
And that's the problem. That's kind of where I'm at, and I think my wife's at now, is, you do that for so long and so many times over that at a certain point I need a friggin' break. I'm exhausted. I'm done having that same argument. So if it is a couple holiday seasons of I need a break, which sounds cruel and insane. Never would have thought I'd be here, 20 years ago. I'm there right now. And it's just like, I need a friggin' break. I want to enjoy my family. I want the three of us to enjoy time together. I want, us to be able to talk about what's going on in the world without having to hold our tongues. I want, but talking about the teaching of American history, Tyler, can't wait for my kid to show up into high school history class. And we're talking about one of the two kids in both math and reading gifted program as a fourth grader, but there's only two fourth graders that are in both, and they're best friends. Him and his buddy are they're super intelligent. They're like they are interested in things, and they're going to read these books. They're going to have these discussions with their parents, and they're going to go back to school and be able to regurgitate it. And it's going to be interesting, and you, it sounds like you and your wife, you got a pretty good shot of your kid being that type of person. You never know what.
Yeah, it's exciting because my wife is more in the STEM studies. That's what she studied and it's what she does for a living. So we kind of have this we're both excited for very different parts of schooling to start. Where she's excited to get into all the STEM fields with him and get him super prepped for all that and excited for that. And I'm kind of history and the arts. That's all I'm about, right? I will make you a freaking savant at this stuff because I love it. It's just a personal love of mine. And if I can share that and have them, show off, for lack of better words, right? And kind of like, learn, but also teach, right? Like teach within the school and like teach his friends, like, oh, hey, like I can, kind of like give a bit more like, information around just the study that we're like learning, because like, my folks won't shut up about it. That's exciting to me, right? The prospect of teaching, but also like having like my son also like, potentially teach others, right? And share that knowledge. Yeah. That's just, and then of course, Jesse as a professor,
and then right
that would
now
be so great.
Too, it's just the giving them all the tools to be able to be interested in things that are above their supposed skill level. I mean, my wife's a choir teacher, but could have also been a journalism major. She's very smart. So reading to him constantly and doing all the little, just playing family games. My God, we had him playing Yahtzee at like 4.5 years old, and by the time he was 5 years old, he was adding up his own score sheet.
That's awesome.
Just because you're doing things, you're giving him tools so that he's not afraid to go try something else. That's the kind of stuff that then the kid who's also sitting in class, who just has been sitting and consuming YouTube videos 24/7 for the last 8-9 years, where does that discussion go? In school, what is Conrad going to bring up with his teacher, and however their teacher's teaching that lesson with whatever the school system wants them to teach it, and where does that go? I don't know. These are the things I think about. They're going to be really interesting. And so that's where I also don't want to teach him to just dismiss people who have different views. Obviously not. That's always going to be there. But yeah, right now we just needed a break.
It's exciting for both of us, and hopefully to any other parents listening here, that gives you something to think about, with your own family. And like, if you're having, kind of speaking to our audience for a second here, if you have these questions or, these concerns over like being a new parent, or not even being a parent, just maybe just handling, conservative friends and family members, or liberal friends and family members if you're conservative, that's also can be an issue, right? Just somebody who thinks opposite of you. Hopefully this is engaging, and hopefully this discussion kind of gave you something to think about, and some way to, hopefully some tool to take with you as we go into the holiday season, with Thanksgiving tomorrow, as the time that we're recording this, which I'm realizing you're going to hear this after Thanksgiving, whatever. Holiday season coming up, right? With Christmas or whatever whatever holiday you celebrate.
There's still Christmas. There's still all the things.
Right. There will be lots of opportunities to have very awkward conversations and have large dinner tables with people that you're like, your brain is pulsing, like praying they don't say something. Hopefully this gives you some insight as to how to handle those conversations and what to say and maybe what not to say. But thank you. Thank you so much, Tom, for joining us. I think this is an awesome, insightful conversation. I think there's a lot of information in here that people are going to be able to take home with them and grow from. So I know I will, for sure. Like, I'm going to be taking your parental, stories and such with me, and hopefully integrating them into my own way of thinking too, because I think it's really, really helpful. So thank you, Tom, for joining us.
Well, thank you guys. I really, really, really enjoyed this, and it's almost it's therapeutic to actually get to talk to two guys who are fairly like-minded to me too, because it's, these conversations are tougher to come by than you might think. And I hope I gave your listeners some good content, but mostly it was just really cool to get to chat with you guys and talk about things that matter.
Man, really appreciate it, Tom. What a good time. So glad to have you. Would love to have you back. We're gonna, the invitation is open. We really love being able to share different perspectives here on the podcast. And as we said, the title speaks for itself. We're trying to figure out how do we move forward and create a more united country, unlike the de-united states that certain people are really putting forward right now. But grateful for your time, grateful for your insights, and for the work you're doing both as a parent and in your day-to-day life. Thank you for sharing your insights with us, and I can't wait to see you on Friday for poker night, though please don't take my money again.
I'll try not to.
Tomageddon strikes again.
Jesse needs it for his honeymoon.
Oh God, I do. You that's a joke, but it's serious. Anyway,
when and where is that?
We're leaving in January. We're going out to Fiji for a better part of a
Awesome.
week. So, and then we're gonna stop
That's so
in
cool.
California on the way back. So, it'll be a great time. But thank you, Tom. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
And with that, we thank our listeners, as always, for joining us. I hope you've had, by the time you're listening to this, I hope you've had a great Thanksgiving and a great Thanksgiving weekend. And we really appreciate you sharing your time with us. Reach out to us at Reunited States Pod. And from Manchester, New Hampshire, my name is Jesse Saywell.
And from Los Angeles, California, my name is Tyler Ehrig.
And this has been Reunited States.
When the whole world has got you down, and there's no one else around, turn that frown